A pleasant good morning to everyone present here. With an immense greatness, on behalf of Nanjal Catholic College of Arts and Science, I welcome you all to the webinar on Fashion in Fairytales and in Capitalist Society. Fashion is the armor to survive the reality of everyday life. Fashion plays a major role in our society and also affects the social aspects of our society. It is said to have the ability to display one's personality. It also displays the feelings and mood of a person based on the clothes that we choose to wear. Fashion in Fairy Tale is unique, imaginative exhibition which examines fairy tale through the lens of high fashion. Fairy tale fashion is an important tool in the garment and accessory industries too, from 18th century till today. This fashion has led a way to the fashion and capitalist industry too. So let's learn more on this subject by initiating our webinar with a warm welcome by Mrs. Merlin Mahil, the Assistant Professor of English Department. Over to you, ma'am.
A pleasant good morning to one and all. It's immense pleasure to welcome you all to this online platform to attend this webinar, Fashion on Fairy Tales and Capitalism. At the outset, I invoke the incredible blessings of Lord Almighty to lead and guide us throughout this webinar. It's my privilege to welcome our respected Secretary Father, Reverend Eckerman Michael, whose smiling and positive approach towards everyone elevates the excellence of our college. In absentia, I extend my warm welcome to you, Father. I'm much honored to welcome a man of vigorous learning and unending thirst of knowledge. That's none other than our principal, Dr. Meenakshi Sundarajan. I extend a cheerful welcome to you, sir. I feel blessed to welcome our Honorable Chief Guest, Mrs. Sandra Betricia, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Madras Christian College, Chennai. We are eagerly waiting to hear your valuable, thoughtful, and honeyed words, ma'am. I extend a red carpet welcome you, ma'am. It's happy to welcome HOD, Mr. Ruben Rajashekar, who has organized this webinar to highlight the mode of learning and to reveal the artistic nature and literature. We appreciate your efforts and extend your cordial welcome, sir. Next, I welcome my dear work alcoholic colleagues whose efforts make this occasion a grand one. And also, I welcome all the professors, assistant professors, students, research scholars who have come to quench the thirst of knowledge through this webinar. I extend a sociable welcome to you all. This session is, of course, going to be a fruitful and a booster to all one. Have a nice time. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you so much, ma'am. When you have nothing to do, but when you say, when your passion moves, make it stop. Such is our person, our principal. I, with great pleasure, invite our principal, Dr. Meenakshi Sundarajan, to give away an inaugural address. Over to you, sir.
Hello? Okay. Resource person, Mrs. Cinderella Patricia, Dr. Ruben, Head Department of English of our college, assistant professors and professors from our college and other colleges, and my dear participants. On behalf of Nanjal Catholic College, my good morning to all. I am really happy to inaugurate this webinar, and I really congratulate the resource person to select the topic fashion in fairy tales and the capitalist society. But I know the capitalist society, what is the role of the capitalist society, and the European countries and American countries are dominated by the capitalism, and Russia and China affected by the communism. So how the capitalist society or capitalist system changed the fashion pattern throughout the European countries, American countries. When the British ruled by all the countries in the world, the fashion fairy tales is spread to all the Asian countries also. Now, if you look at the India, India is not at all either following capitalism or socialism, but we are following the fashion in fairy tales. So, what is the impact of capitalism and the fashion in the fairy tales, or the impact of fashion in the fairy tales and or capitalist society? I don't have any idea about it. Since I am from the Department of Economics, I am having thorough knowledge about the capitalist society, but regarding the literature, my knowledge is very, very limited. But it is a new topic. Actually, I know about many topics. Our college organized many webinars, but it is a new topic. I really congratulate the resource person to select this topic. Her speech will be very helpful to the professor participants of the English department. I really congratulate the department of our English and the resource person. Thank you one and all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful warm address. Much here and great presence in America. I request the head of the Department of English Agents, Mr. Ruben Rajashekar, to introduce the chief guest of the day with a wonderful gathering. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Reshma, for inviting me to introduce the resource person, Ms. Cinderella Teresa. Dear respected father, beloved principal, distinguished guests, colleagues, and my dear students, a warm greeting once again to all of you. I take immense pleasure of English College, one of the top ranking institutions in India. She's a well-known and a well-spoken personality, both inside and outside the campus. I know her personally for the past few years as a good learner who spends precious time in reading books and articles. I'm sure that her research publications and presentations focus on fashion. She herself is a costume designer, active. In other words, the researcher will instigate all of us, boys and girls, prepare yourself to pay attention for the presentation of Professor Cinderella Teresa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. The sun enlightens everyone, but the light of knowledge enlightens those who are actively seeking for it. We are the seekers of light today, and our sun is Mrs. Cinderella Betreza, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Madras Christian College. She is here to enlighten us with her light of knowledge. I, with great love and honor, request her to address this meeting. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, everyone, so much for that wonderful welcome, your warm words of welcome. It really makes me feel very, very special and honored and privileged to be with you all now. Just again, the usual practice that we have while attending meetings or anything online. Is my audio clear? Or I hope I am audible. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, so yes, oh my God, thank you so much for the overwhelming response. I really wish you could continue with this response throughout the webinar. All right, so I really wish it's interactive. I really want it to be interactive, so it'll be really nice to hear your responses as well. So without further ado, let's move on to the topic. The topic given to us today is fashion in fairy tales and the capitalist society. So you might wonder how is fashion even, how does it even come under the purview of literature, right? Because we have always thought of literature as something that is written, something that is spoken, all right, and something that is recorded in a matter of speech. So we have texts like movies. With the in the modern age, we have movies, we have songs, which have been considered to be texts, literary texts, and then in the modern age now we even have, everything really comes under the purview of literature. Video games come under the purview of literature. uh, uh, Unconventional texts come under the purview of literature. And that is because literature really is the reflection of life, right? It reflects life. Without life, literature cannot really exist, right? And without society, literature cannot exist. Literature does not exist in a vacuum, right? So it needs a context, and it derives its context from the society. All right, so we are going to deal with this topic on this basis, right? That literature finds its context, or it finds its meaning in society. And as you all know, we all belong to society, right? In our own uh, strength. So let me just share my screen with you. Okay, I hope this is visible.
Yes.
Yes, thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am, it's visible.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your response. All right, so fashion in fairy tales and the capitalist society. So before moving into a study, any study, we need to find out if it is relevant to us in any manner. So as I've already told you, literature finds its context in society. So the study that we do should always have some sort of a social relevance, all right? the study will not be, I mean, you can do a study on something that is probably not relevant to the society, but what do we gain out of it? All right. So now we need to look at the end result, or what is it that we infer from the study that we undertake, right? So we should always look into the social relevance of the study. All right. So now we need to look at the social relevance of this topic. All right. And one of the reasons is because in the present age, in the modern age, everything has become interdisciplinary. All right. Meaning you cannot keep focusing on just one discipline. We need to branch out because life is, interdisciplinary, right? We are, if you observe life itself, you'll find that we have a part of every discipline acting on our life, right? We need language, right? Without language, life actually cannot exist, because language is used for communication. All right. Without economics, lang- uh, life cannot exist, right? Because our society is built on economics. All right. So business, transactions, right? Everything comes under economics, right? And medicine, we cannot have imagined life without medicine, right? So all these things, entertainment even, all right? So all these things are interdisciplinary, all right? And we need to focus on all these disciplines to actually come out with a proper study and a proper uh, solution to the issue at hand. All right. And that is because life is an amalgamation of different fields, right? When you amalgamate something, you bring everything together, right? You bring everything together, you mix it up. All right. So that is what life actually is, right? uh, Excuse me 1 second. Okay, so that is it. So how is this topic relevant to us now? We will be applying theory. All right. Theory in the sense, as you all know, theory is it's nothing but a system of particular ideas, right? So you talk about feministic theory. Feministic theory deals with ideas regarding feminism, women's issues, gender issues. All right. So it is a system of ideas. You take Marxist theory, it is again a system of ideas. All right. So all these theories, they have specific ideas within them. All right. And when we put theory into practice, when we become interdisciplinary, we need to become pluralistic, meaning we cannot just be fixated on one particular theory. All right. Because again, as I told you, life is not just one field. All right. It is an amalgamation. So we need to take whatever is relevant from the different theories and bring it together. All right. And that is one of the ways through which we can actually come up with some sort of a practical solution, all right, or some sort of a practical understanding even to a particular issue. All right. So here we will be looking into linguistics also. Now, again, I will not be going into this theory in detail. I will be using certain concepts. I will be actually applying certain concepts from these theories. Okay, so we'll move on. So to understand the relevance, we need to look at the three elements that we find in the topic. All right, so the topic is fashion in fairy tales and the capitalist society. So fashion actually here means clothing fashion. All right, so fashion can mean anything, right? But here it means clothing fashion. So clothing fashion is actually a language system, because we communicate using clothing. All right, the way we dress, what we wear, everything communicates something to the society or to another person even. All right, the way we wear our hair, the ornaments that we wear, whether we wear an ornament or not. All right, so all those things, and also the way we wear articles of clothing. All right, so all those things communicate something. Right, and since it is a language system, it obviously is relevant to the society. Right, because again, as you know, without language society cannot exist. Without clothing we really cannot imagine life. The next portion in the title is fairy tale. Right, so what exactly is a fairy tale? Right, a fairy tale is nothing but a folk tale with elements of magic or the supernatural playing a part in the story. All right, so I mean, that's why we even have the term. It is a fairy tale. Fairy is something magical, all right? It is a creature of magic and it is supernatural. It is not part of the natural world as we know it. All right, so fairy tale is a story with magical elements. But on the other hand, it is also a folk tale. All right, so what exactly is a folk tale? So let's dissect this term, folk tale. So folk means people, all right? People in general, the masses, all right? And tale is a story. So put these two terms together, we get a folk tale, meaning a story belonging to the people or a story of the people. All right. So it is not something with a lot of rules or regulations. No, classical tales will have a lot of rules and regulations. All right. So for example, we can take folk music and classical music. So classical music, as most of you know, it has a lot of rules, right? And to even learn classical music, we need to undergo rigorous training, right? A very, very formal training because it has a lot of rules. And if we diverge from those rules, it does not, it is actually a taboo. All right, because that is not what classical music is. But folk music is music which comes from the people. All right, it is music that was created for the purpose of taking the people forth in their daily life, right? So people would come up with folk music when they work, right? When they have a sort of an entertainment, right? When they come together as a community, right? So that is what folk tale, that's the principle on which the folk tale is also based on, right? It is a story belonging to the people, right? It's not something which is far away from us. It is something which is very, very near to us, right? And it has a lot of relevance to our life because most of us would have grown up with folk tales and fairy tales, right? We would have been told a lot of folk tales and fairy tales by our teachers, by our parents, our grandparents, especially. All right, and children are actually, uh, introduced to fairy tales and folk tales from a very small age, right? So it has a lot of relevance to our regular life, right? The next element in the title is capitalist society, which is a society focusing on profit. So we know that most of our life, no, most facets of our life focuses on some sort of a profit, right? What is it that we get out of the service that we do or the commodity that we sell? All right. So that is what I'm not going too much into economic theory or anything like that, but it's something very, very simple. So profit is something that actually drives our life. All right, we always like to have something, extra. All right, we always want to have some extra money. All right, can we earn something extra so that we can have that extra thing in life? All right, we really are, most of us are actually not uh, satisfied with just the bare necessities. All right, we want to have a comfortable life. We want to have that little bit of extra, right, to make our life a bit better, right? So all these three elements play a very, very, very huge part in our life, right? So this is how this topic is actually socially relevant, because all three elements touch upon a part or a facet of our life. All right, so now we need to look into the nexus between fashion, fairy tales, and the capitalist society. So what do you mean by the word nexus, right? So nexus is nothing but the connection between two or more elements, all right? The interfacing, the place where two or more elements meet. All right, so what is the connection between these three elements? All right, so we need to first look into fashion, meaning clothing fashion, and then fairy tales, and then the capitalist society. So what is the purpose of clothing? Right? What is the purpose of clothing? So clothing actually has three basic purposes. One is protection, right? We wear clothing to protect ourselves from the elements around us, right? You go out in the sun without proper clothing, you will burn yourself, right? Your skin might get burnt, and we might face a lot of issues, medical issues and all those things. So it's actually protection. You go out in the rain without proper protection, you might, fall ill. All right, you might catch a cold, that will lead to a lot of complications and all those things. You go out in the cold without proper protection, again, that will lead to some other health issues. All right, so the first and foremost purpose of clothing is protection, and that is one of the very first reasons why the early human beings actually started wearing clothing. They wanted to protect themselves from the harsh environment around them. All right, so please remember, when man started living in communities, they did not have buildings like this, right? They did not have all this technology, they did not have all these developments. All right, they were actually nomads, right? They moved from place to place, right? So all they had to depend on was the element or the object on their back. All right, so they made sure they looked to animals for that, right? They hunted animals, they skinned those animals, and they used the skin of the animals to clothe themselves, right? So they were actually imitating animals. They used the skin, the fur, all those things to protect themselves from the elements, to protect themselves from the extreme heat and the extreme cold, right? And the next purpose of clothing is ornamentation, right? Ornamentation is nothing but adornment, right? Decoration. All right, so protection is necessity, ornamentation is actually not necessity. All right, so under ornamentation you get a lot of symbolic references in clothing. All right, so if you look at um, no, okay, let's take the Native Americans, right? So they use a lot of feathers in their attire, right? And feathers have a lot of symbolic meaning for them. All right, and if you look at the head, and they most of the communities or most of the societies around the world, they have a sort of a hierarchy. All right, meaning a social position, right? Everyone in that particular community is segregated into social positions, right? So usually, in the European society, no, not just the European society, it's there nearly all around the world. You have the head or the leader of the community or the group of people, and then you have a religious leader. All right, and then you have the common people. Right, so these positions have certain clothing I mean, articles of clothing as symbols of their state or of their rank or position. All right. So that is where the headdress comes in. All right. So, so I hope all of you know that a leader is always identified by the regalia that he or she wears. All right. And ancient clothing systems were full of symbols. All right. So if a person wears a particular kind of a headdress, it means that they are taking part in a particular social role. Right. So clothing came to be identified with a person's social role. All right, and that is where ornamentation comes in. You wear a particular jeweled headdress. All right, you wear a crown, that becomes a symbol. All right, you wear a particular chain, right, that becomes a symbol. No, especially here in India, married women wear the Mangal Sutra, right, the tali, as we call in Tamil, right. So that becomes an ornament, that becomes a symbol of that person's social role, that becomes a symbol of that person's social position. All right, it's actually not necessary for her to survive, right? It really doesn't offer any protection from the external elements. All right, but it actually offers a lot of protection from the elements within society, right? Meaning ideas. All right, so ornamentation is always associated with ideas, right? Because they're symbols, right? They represent an idea. All right, so even now we have a lot of ornamentation. We'll look into that in the uh, further slides. The next purpose is modesty, right? And as you know, as civilization progressed, as human beings started thinking, right, and as they started generating a lot of ideas, we started letting ideas rule our life. All right, so the early human beings or the early dwellers, they never really had any ideas of modesty the way we have it now. All right, so for them protection was the first and foremost. All right, but for us, modesty is something which is very, very important, right? We always look to wear modest clothes. All right, so the clothes we wear show the kind of person that we are. Right, are we a modest person? And in the present society, modesty is always related to something good, right? And also it is an idea, right? The way chastity is an idea, it is an idea, it is not something tangible, you can't see that, right? It's just it only exists in our mind. Is it clear? Right, so modesty is something, it is a purpose which emerged towards the later ages or later stages of civilization. All right, so the purpose of clothing was developed, in this manner, right? So first protection, and then you have ornamentation, and then modesty. All right, so all these three are very, very important in the present society, right? We need protection, it is important. Ornamentation, we wear certain clothes to symbolize certain things, and then modesty, we wear clothes the way we wear to show who we are, right? So again, that is also based on ideas. So, as anything has a history, clothing also has a history, right? And as I already told you, the early dwellers, they used animal skins to cover themselves as protection, and they also used elements from animals as symbols. All right, they used the claws of animals, and birds were used, right? The teeth of animals were used as amulets, as chains, right? Again, it symbolizes something. All right, so there some cultures or some communities, some early communities, they have what is called as a rite of initiation, or a rite of, or ritual of passing. All right, where a male member of that community passes from boyhood to manhood. All right, and it usually pertains to, or it usually involves the boy killing or overcoming a threat to that community, which will usually be in the form of a dangerous animal or a wild animal. Right, so once that deed is done, once the boy overcomes that threat by killing that animal, he transitions into manhood. All right, and in some societies or in some communities, what to show, to symbolize that this person has transitioned to manhood, thereby getting more privileges, they display the different features or the different parts of that animal, right, on the person. Right, and we also have body modification, tattooing, and all those things coming in. But using a particular article or using a particular object to show this transition has always been there. Right, so again, that comes under ornamentation. So this is how, so clothing, it started developing as civilization started developing. Man started agriculture. He started settling down, building cities, forming societies, communities, forming their own ideas, having their own lifestyle. So with agriculture came weaving. All right, so it is only after man settled down that he actually looked to plants for clothing. Right, so weaving was discovered. Right, it was actually invented. The earliest, no, it was all natural fiber. So it was flax. All right, you had cotton. All right, so you had natural fibers, and after that, silk was discovered in China. All right, so weaving is actually a very difficult process. It is a very difficult, it is a very time consuming process. All right, and it requires a lot of labor. All right, so weaving, it requires harvesting that plant material, processing it, right, spinning that those fibers into yarn. All right, and then weaving the yarn into clothing. All right, and after the cloth is made ready, it is stitched. All right, it is stitched into a particular shape so that it fits the wearer. All right, so creation of a cloth or a dress was a very expensive endeavor. All right, so that is one of the reasons why most of the early dwellers, most of the people from the belonging to the early civilizations, they wore their own dresses. All right, I mean, their own fabric for their own dresses. They made their own dresses, right? Unlike now, where the fabric is woven somewhere, it is imported or exported to another place where it is stitched, right, into a clothing, and then that particular clothing is then transported to some other place where it is held, where it is displayed for the consumers to come and buy, and then we go and buy. All right, so we really don't know the process of how a dress becomes a dress. All right, but earlier they knew, and they knew the worth of that, because they knew the labor was intensive and the raw materials was very, very expensive. All right, so what happened was, as time passed, dresses came to symbolize a person's social class or a person's standing in society. All right, so what happened was, and now I'm focusing mostly on European fashions, because we are actually quite familiar with that because of media. Right, so what actually happened was, the social hierarchy was established. All right, and people in the higher class or the aristocracy, they wanted to make sure that they set themselves apart, right, from the other members of the society. All right, meaning, how do they do that? Right, how do they arrive at this distinction? Right, they can, so they decided that the best way of distinguishing uh, people is through the dress, through what they consume, right? Their dress, the behavior, the food that they eat. All right, all those things come under consumables. right? And one very important sign, or one very important element of distinction, was the dress, right? So what happened was, we had what is called as uh, sumptuary laws. All right, sumptuary laws. So sumptuary laws were laws uh, put forth by the rulers, right, by the rulers themselves, restricting the amount of consumption a person belonging to a particular social class could consume. All right, so it extended to all consumables, right? And this was put into place, I mean, it was put into place on the base, I mean, it was on the facade that they wanted to reduce the expenses, protect wealth, or protect property, so that people don't just spend their hard-earned wealth or anything like that away on extravagant clothing. But reality was that they wanted to maintain a social class distinction. All right, so if you still are not able to understand what sumptuary laws mean, they are more or less like the dress codes that we have now. The only difference is that we don't have a written dress code now, but there, in the earlier time, sumptuary laws were written down. Right? They were legal laws, and action could be taken against you if you did not follow that particular law. Right now, we can wear whatever dress we want. Right? You want to wear a very rich, very embroidered, with a dress with a lot of embroidery, or a dress with a lot of embellishments. You can wear it if you are able to afford it. All right, no one will go against you, no one will put you in jail, no one will hold you at fault for wearing something so rich. All right, you want to wear the plainest of clothes, again, no one will hold you accountable for that. All right, but earlier it was so. You wear something which did not no if it was not a symbol of your social standing, you will be penalized. Right, so that is how rigorous it was during the older ages. Right, so this was put into place. So they had a lot of codes. Right, they had a lot of codes, they had a lot of rules. Right, so when you look at the social class, or the the structure, the social structure of the older ages, you had the monarch and the aristocracy at the top, and then you had the religious order. Right, so religious order actually came away. Right, it did not, was actually not a part of society. Right, it was a part of society, it catered to the needs of society, but it was actually set apart from society, because they represented God. Right, they did the service of God in on earth. Right, so it's this kind of a situation. And then after that you have the peasants. All right, meaning the bourgeois, actually, meaning middle class people who own businesses, and who went on with their daily life, with a daily business. And then you have the peasants, or the laborers. All right, laborers, or slaves even. Right, so this was the hierarchy. So monarchs had, or the aristocracy had, all the uh, wealth in that place. All right, and to maintain this, they, again, as I told you, set in rules. All right, so they showed this distinction through clothing. Right, so this is a portrait of Queen Elizabeth. Right, Queen Elizabeth the First. All right, so the last Tudor monarch of England. So if you look at this picture, you see that she's actually overflowing with clothes. She's overflowing with fabric. She has a lot of decoration in her, on her hair. She has a lot of decoration on her clothing. And this was a time when clothing was very, very expensive. All right, so this shows this sumptuary law. The monarch was allowed to have whatever they wanted. All right, and also they had most of these dresses had something called a train. Right, so if you look at this picture, the portion which extends, the green portion which extends on the floor, is called a train. Right, and again, this element was used by the aristocracy to show that they were they were miles apart, from the other people in terms of finances, right? Because only people who were wealthy, had the money or the finances to buy fabric that had no other purpose than to just trail behind a person, right, dragging on the floor. All right. So this was a feature of the sumptuary law. All right. And most of the court dresses uh, had restrictions on how long the train had to be. We have something called a monarch train, which is supposed to be the longest. All right. So this is a picture of Lady Curzon. All right. So Lady Curzon was the wife of Lord Curzon, who was the viceroy of India in the 18th, in the 20th century. All right. So he organized what is called as the Delhi Durbar, the second Delhi Durbar. I mean, again, we're going back in history. So you see, and this dress was actually designed by Worth, all right, by the House of Worth. So Worth is actually considered to be the father of haute couture, right, or high fashion, right? So and he, I mean, he's Charles Friedrich Worth, and he established what is called the House of Worth, and it spanned 3 generations, right? So this was designed by Jean-Philippe Worth, all right, his descendant, and this dress, even though it looks very, very European, it is fully embroidered by Indian artisans. Right, the work that you see here, right? These are all peacock feathers, right? And these were embroidered in the Zardozi fashion, right, or the Ari embroidery as we know it, right? So and the green uh, eyes, the eyes of the peacock feather are actually beetle wings. All right, so it was a very, very costly endeavor, right? And since she was the viceroy of India, she was able to afford that, right? And if you look at these pictures, her dress also has a train, all right? And this is the embroidery detailing, and we really cannot imagine that such a detailed piece of clothing was manufactured or was actually made in the early 20th century, right? We think that it is only now, with all the technological developments and everything, that we have a lot of uh, embellishments coming up, right? But this is real art, right? So as we moved on to the modern age, right, we faced world wars, which changed our view of clothing completely. Right, so clothing became minimal because everything had to be, everything had, all the expenses were directed at the war. All right, so everything came down. People started wearing very simple clothes, very practical clothes. Big skirts, they disappeared. All right, and all unwanted or unnecessary embellishments disappeared. Right, the clothing became minimalistic. Right, and that is what is actually continuing now, because with the world wars, most of the monarchy was abolished. You had democracy coming in, right? And as the modern age progressed, right? So now monarchy has become a very, it's actually obsolete, right? Even though we have a lot of royal families in some of the countries, it is obsolete, right? They are like just decoration pieces, right? Even though in England the Queen is considered to be the head of the state, she really does not have any legislative power, right? She's just there for, no, she's just there as a symbol, all right? So that is where we come to this uh, topic, fashion, clothing fashion as a language system, all right? So I hope you guys know about Barthes. All right. So he was a 20th century French critic and semiotician. Right, meaning he talked about symbols. He studied symbols and signs. Right, semiotic means something to do with signs, things which represent others. So he based his study on clothing fashion as a visual language system by applying Sageur's concept of the signifier, the signified, and the lang and parole. All right, so we usually use these terms in linguistics, when we talk about verbal language. All right, but Barthes proved that no, language is a language, all right? It has the basic principles in all languages, all right? So you have a signifier and then you have a signified, all right? So what is actually signifier, signified, lang, and parole, all right? So lang is a term which denotes the body of rules and conventions of a particular signifying system or sign system, all right? So it is a body of, it's latent, all right? It's more or less like the theory, right? It's that it is what it is. And then you have the parole, which is the manifestation or usage of this body of signs. How do we do that, right? So for example, you take the Tamil language, it has its own grammar, it has its own structure, right? It has its own rules and regulations, but the way we use the Tamil language is actually different, right? So the lang is the Tamil language as a whole, but the parole is the way we use the language, right? So Tamil is used in different ways in different parts of Tamil Nadu, all right? So that is the meaning of lang and parole. And then within the lang and parole, we have what is called as the signifier signified concept, all right? So the signifier is a sign, right? And the signified is what the sign represents, right? So in verbal language, signifier is a word, all right? So for example, take the word table, T-A-B-L-E, table, all right? It is a word, all right? But what does it signify? All right, it signifies an object with a flat top and possibly four legs, four or three legs, depending on the style. All right, so this word signifies, or this word represents that object, all right, even though the relationship between these two elements are abstract, right? You don't have any concrete uh, relation, right? It just signifies it, that's all, right? That is the relation. So this is the same thing with dress, right? As I already told you, articles of clothing uh, work as signifiers or act as signifiers, meaning they represent something. So we'll quickly go over this. This is a symbol which you might have come across a lot, right? This, you might have seen the symbol, pasted in the rear view windshield of cars, right? So what does this symbolize? This is a signifier, right? And this symbolizes that this person is a doctor, right? Which again, the, which again translate to medicine, right? So this is a signifier, and the doctor is the signified. What does it represent? All right, and this is another symbol, sign that we encounter a lot. Okay, so this signifies that the person in the car, or the car to whom which this belongs to, is a lawyer or an advocate, meaning a practitioner of the law, and that is what is the signified. Again, this signifies graduation or a degree. Again, it symbolizes academics. All right. So you see, by just looking into these logos or these signs, we are actually able to accord meaning to it. All right. And that is what we do when we talk about dress. So articles of clothing act as signifiers. Right. I'm sorry, I have to run because we're running out of time. So articles of clothing act as signifiers. Right. So they signify the wearer's social class, gender, profession, etc. You wear a pair of pants, you might come under fire by, from conventional sources which say that a pair of pants are masculine and you're either supposed to wear a skirt or something like that, or a sari or something like that. All right, so you see how articles of clothing signify a person's gender. All right, you have long clothes, you are automatically recognized as a female of the society, right? You crop your hair short, you're automatically recognized as a male member of the society, right? So these are all signifiers, and this is what they signify. So they're also used as symbols. Okay, so what is the difference between signs and symbols? Signs represent something concrete, right? So the symbol for the doctor, the advocate, all those things are all signs, right? They just represent what is there, what is real, right? But they don't actually represent an idea, right? They represent something that is existing. But symbols represent the abstract, right? Meaning they represent something that is not tangible. All right, symbols represent ideas, all right, ideas that will come up by the society. So if you look at this picture, right, it is what is called, I wanted this session to be interactive, but since we're running out of time, I'm just going to rush through it. This is a tiara, right? It's not a crown, it is a tiara, right? And this is a crown, right? More specifically, this is the crown of, this is actually called as the state crown of England, all right? Meaning this crown can be worn only by the monarch of England, all right? Meaning this can be worn only by Queen Elizabeth II in the present age. All right, but this is a tiara, which means it can be worn by any member of the society. Right, but again, tiaras are have always been symbols of rank. They've always been signifiers of rank, right? Rank, social position, and everything. So if you look at the aristocratic class, they would wear a tiara, right? So it doesn't matter if you're a princess or a queen, even a baroness. If you look at Lady Curzon's image, she was a baroness, right? But still she was wearing a tiara, right? That is because it shows her wealth, right? It's all jewelry, it's all precious stones made from precious metal, all right? So it shows your rank. And this is the coronation gown of Queen Elizabeth II, right? But looking at it out of context, it just looks like a gown, all right? A gown with some embellishments, right? Probably looks expensive, all right? But look at this gown in this regalia, all right? This gown has been paired with what we call a cape and a train, all right? It is a mantle, right? And this mantle shows that the person wearing the mantle is the monarch, right? It symbolizes monarchy. It does not signify monarchy. The state crown and this mantle symbolizes monarchy. Again, monarchy, as you all know, it's an idea, right? Now in the present age, it has become obsolete. It has become an idea. It has become a fantasy, all right? And as you all know, we are always curious about things which we are not familiar with, all right? The reason why we are so curious about Western fashion is because we're not familiar. We don't actually see people, roaming around the streets wearing a gown, all right? So it's something which is very, very exotic to us, right? So this is regalia. This symbolizes something, all right? So this is the history of clothing, right? So this is what it means. Clothing had a meaning, right? But now what has happened? You mention a gown, and immediately something like this will crop up in your mind, all right? This really has no significant, no symbolism whatsoever, right? It's just a gown, all right? And now we have been so uh, uh, we have started identifying the gown with royalty, that we agree that anything in that particular shape is represents royalty, right? So moving on to fairy tales, most of the fairy tales actually had original versions, all right? And I'm taking one fairy tale for an example. So the popular version of the popular fairy tale of Cinderella, right? So you have Cinderella again. It did not originate with Walt Disney's movie. It had popular versions. All right. So the very first version recorded is a Greek Egyptian story. It is actually a folk tale, right? Titled Rhodopis, right? So Rhodopis was a Greek girl who was kidnapped by raiders when she was working and taken to Egypt, sold into slavery. All right. And since she was a Greek girl, she had really delicate thong sandals. All right, meaning straps sandals. All right. So what happened was once she was bathing and she had removed her sandals. A hawk came and picked the sandal, flew and dropped the sandal on the lap of the Egyptian pharaoh. All right. So the pharaoh was so intrigued by the delicateness of that sandal that he wanted to meet. He wanted to know who the owner of the sandal was. So Rhodopis was brought in, and he fell in love with her, and she became the queen. He married her, and she became the queen of Egypt. Right. So again, it's a Cinderella story with Cinderella archetypes or motives, but it does not have supernatural elements. Right. So it is actually a folk tale. So the next one, the next popular version is, we have a lot of versions, but I'm just taking the popular versions. Like the next popular version was 1697 French tale written by Charles Perrault, titled Cendrillon. All right, and that is where we first encounter magical elements coming in. right? You have the fairy godmother turning the pumpkin into a coach, transforming her torn dress. You have the stepsisters coming and ripping her clothes and all those things. So the the 1950s version of Walt Disney was actually inspired by Charles Perrault's Cinderella, right? And the third one is the Grimm brothers, Aschenputtel. All right, so here Aschenputtel, it has some gory details, like how you don't really have a fairy godmother there, but Ashen Patel, she goes and cries in her mother's grave, right? And the tears, from the tears, they spring a magical tree, and that tree grants all of Ashen Patel's desires, right? It throws down a gown made of gold and silver threads, right? Meaning very royal, right? Very expensive. It gives a glass slippers and all those things. And then the story goes on the same way. And then when the prince comes in search of Ashen Patel, with the shoe as an identifier, the stepsisters go to even the extent of cutting off their toes and heels to make sure that their feet, fits into the slipper. All right, but the Greek, I'm sorry, not the prince. He identifies. He looks at the blood, and he thinks that, okay, maybe Aschenputtel is here, and then he searches the place and he finds her. All right, so you do have some gory details, in some of the versions of the fairy tale. And then Walt Disney Cinderella is one of the most popular versions of the Cinderella story that we have now. Right. So if you look at most of these fairy tales, they have what is called as a princess archetype. All right, meaning you have the visual archetype of the princess, meaning the archetype actually means a base image, right? The base image from which all the other things stem from. Right, Jung actually has come up with something called an archetypal criticism. You can go and read about it. So the visual archetype of a princess, the visual of the princess archetype consists of a gown and a tiara. Right, so here the gown and tiara become signifiers of the idea of the princess. All right, so they represent the idea, right? It's not, they don't represent a real princess, they represent the idea of a princess in the present age. So you see, the girl is wearing a gown and she is wearing a crown. She's identified as a princess. Right? All right, so how does the capitalist society uh, come into this? All right, so now you find that the capitalist society, it commodifies this visual archetype, all right, by taking control of the idea behind this archetype, right? So they're exploiting this visual archetype of the princess. All right, so earlier these gowns, these dresses, these articles of clothing were all symbols, right? But now they have been reduced to just an idea, all right, a fantasy idea or a fantastic idea, right, that people want to live, right? So you might ask, how do you say that this is the princess, this is the visual of the princess archetype, right? How did you come to this conclusion, right? So in 2016, there was a survey conducted titled the Shattered Slipper Project: the impact of Disney Princess franchise on girls 6 to 12. Right? How do they perceive this fairy tale princess? So one question in that survey, in that questionnaire, was, what does a princess look like? Right? What does a princess look like? So what do you think of when you say the word princess? So these were the options given as the external qualities, right? She has to be the pretty heels, pretty shoes, long hair, skinny dress, perfect, smooth hair, makeup, crown, royal, smile, regular person, blonde hair in the sense golden hair, proper, and does not matter. All right. So these were the options given, and out of 62 responses, the top responses were pretty with 18 responses, right? So we don't really know what what it means to be pretty, because it's an abstract idea. But the second response, the second topmost response, was dress with 13 responses. Right? So again, dress relating to a princess would obviously be a gown. Right? And then the next response, the next top response was the crown, right, which was actually the tiara, right? There's a difference between a crown and a tiara, because a crown, as I already told you, it will be worn by monarchs or rulers of a society, right? Princesses don't wear crowns, they wear tiaras, right? So we can come to the conclusion that pretty means wearing a dress and a tiara. All right. So this is how people imagine a princess to be. So it's not just this image, but the very name of the princesses become signifiers of this archetype. All right. So you mention the name Cinderella or Rapunzel, immediately you are taken to the image of a girl wearing a gown and a tiara. Right. So these archetypes are now commodified through media, especially advertisements. Right. So they use this image, right, this princess image or the name of the character itself to 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 prey on the people's desires. All right. And as you all know, advertisements, they create a need for commodities by utilizing their sign value. Right. Sign value is a term which was brought out by the French theorist Jean Baudrillard. All right. So he talks about how he moves on from Karl Marx's terms of use value and exchange value. He talks about sign value, where the sign or sign is actually the prestige of the project of the product, right? Owning something of sign, it is a prestige. You own an iPhone, or you own some any implement that was created by the Apple company. It is a sign of prestige. All right. And they actually they advertise the brand rather than the component or the object or the product itself. All right. So this is exactly what is happening here. Right. So advertisements, capitalist society now, they advertise the idea of the princess, all right, or the idea of the princess archetype, right? And since we are so fascinated by those ideas, we feel that we have the need to look and feel like a princess, right? And we think that we are made to think that we will get this feel of looking or feeling like a princess only when we wear a tiara and a dress, right? So this is what Karl Marx and Baudrillard talks about. You can read it in Marxist theory. I'm not going to go into that. I just wanted to play two commercials, right, which deal with these ideas. So can I just have a few minutes, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am, you can.
I just want, because I'm almost to the end of this thing.
Okay,
All right.
fine, ma'am.
So thank you so much. So the first thing is a commercial for Rapunzel. All right. And this was marketed by Mattel, the company Mattel, and where Barbie, the Barbie doll, it stars as Rapunzel, which is again a fairy tale character in an animated movie. So as you know, movies are used as launch pads for these capitalist societies, they sectors. They come up with toys, they come up with dresses. All right. And this commercial shows how they actually capitalize and monopolize this idea of the princess. So I just play this video for you. Okay, is this visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's
Yes.
visible.
From her new movie, My Size Rapunzel Barbie. She's my size. From her new movie, My Size Rapunzel Barbie. She's my size. You can share her silky long hair and the gown she wears. What do you think, Penelope? Beautiful. Rapunzel Barbie. Doll is 3 feet tall and comes with one outfit.
Okay, so this commercial, it shows how the children are are actually made to think that they can dress up like that princess, all right, like that Barbie. All right. So they do this with the clothes that have been provided with the doll. All right. Where is it? Okay, here. All right. So this shows that this idea of the princess, this idea of the fairy tale princess, is actually sold to the consumers through visual aids, by through advertisements. All right. So this is one advertisement, and there's another one you might have come up. You might have seen this advertisement a lot. So the Rapunzel advertisement was for visual images, and this one is for the name, right? How the name itself is associated with uh, the princess archetype.
Hello everyone, this is your Roja, alias Priyanka. So today I take you to I'm sure Nangambakam. Actually, this is my favorite place because you all know that I'm a frog lover, and here, oh my god, a lot of collection, beautiful gowns. Just take a look, okay? This suits me a lot. Okay, so today you're going to see me in Cinderella transformation in just 60 minutes. Just wait for it. As I promised, 60 minutes long Cinderella transformation. Take a look. How is it? Good? I'm looking at Cinderella.
Okay, so in this commercial, you'll see how the term, the name Cinderella is associated with this princess archetype, right? We don't know how Cinderella looked, all right? Those are all just imaginations, right? With every version of the fairy tale, the dress would change, right? And also with culture, all right? So you see how the name itself has been monopolized by the capitalist society. Again, it's just for study purposes. I'm not against any uh, this thing. So it's just a study. So these are the commercials. I just want to show you this, how how commercials create a need for for things which probably we might not need, right? So what do we conclude from this? Right, we conclude that modern society is filled with signs, right? And these signs affect the way we perceive reality, right? So Baudrillard, he talks about simulacra and simulation. So where he talks about how now the modern society has only signs, right? These are all just representations of what was once original, right? And how media culture is actually helping capitalist sectors to monopolize on this, right? So that is what we actually base this on. So the capitalist sector uses these signs to commodify everyday objects. Here, it is clothing objects, to monopolize our needs and subsequently profiting out of it, right? Because they create this need out of our desire, right? They create a desire, they create a need, right? By associating visual images with ideas, with obsolete ideas, which we find fascinating, right? So I think we have overshot my time. So I'll finish with this. Thank you all so much for giving me this opportunity. Uh, I know I wanted to finish it off soon, but I really couldn't. Thank you all so much for being very, very patient with me. Thank you all so much for listening patiently. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, your presentation had a very unique idea. You showed us a new
Okay, thank you.
perspective of studying Bata's and Sasu's theory with clothing fashion. It was really different idea. Thank you for enlightening us with such a brilliant idea. Now, dear participants, if you have any doubts, any queries, you can ask that in a chat box. Please put your questions in the chat box.
If you want to speak, you can also speak. I welcome speaking people. Maybe you can raise your hand if you want to ask something. I hope my presentation was clear. I know I rushed through a lot of concepts, but no, due to time constraints, we had to. So,
Yeah, ma'am, your presentation was perfect.
okay, thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay, so I hope there is no doubts. So let's end our program with a word of thanks as it is a sign of good learning. I request Ms. C. Subhashri, Assistant Professor of English Department, to deliver a word of thanks. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning. It's my excellence and enthusiasm to propose word of thanks in this webinar entitled Fashion and Fairy Tales and Capitalist Society. Gratitude makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. At the outset, I praise my Lord Almighty, who showered his blessings to lead this program a grand success. Next, it's my pleasure to thank our Honorable Secretary, Reverend Father Eckermans Michael, whose innovative and thought-provoking efforts